Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. Juan Orlando Hernandez was sentenced to 45 years in prison last year for his role in a drug trafficking operation that moved 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. He's also the former president of Honduras. I think it's hard to argue that he didn't earn those 45 years in prison. And given how anti-drug this country has become, especially since the Nixon era, this certainly looked like the kind of sentence that you would expect, that it would serve as a deterrent and said, look, we do not tolerate this sort of thing here in America. Drug traffickers like this go to prison and they stay in prison. That's what you'd think until our criminal president Donald Trump got involved and said, hold on, one minuto, and gave this man presidential pardon. So instead of spending decades in prison as his sentence required, Hernandez only spent 4 years behind bars as punishment for his crimes, which I suppose, considering that our current president has spent 0 years behind bars for his crimes, probably seems like a lot. When asked why he would pardon this man, the president said, I was asked by Honduras, many of the people of Honduras, really thought he was set up, and it was a terrible thing. They basically said he was a drug dealer because he was the president of the country, and they said it was a Biden administration setup, and I looked at the facts, and I agreed with them. Unsurprisingly, the president's claims don't quite hold up to scrutiny, ignoring his claim that the people of Honduras cried out for the release of their former president. While it was true that former President Hernandez did claim that he was an innocent victim of a organized setup, it was not one perpetrated by the U.S. government and the Biden administration. He claimed that it was actually revenge by drug traffickers that he had helped extradite to the United States. So I guess liar criminal presidents have to stick together, because the trial judge painted a very different picture. According to them, the former president painted himself as a strong anti-drug leader who was working with not one but 3 presidential administrations to go after those bringing drugs into the country. But what he'd actually been doing was using his nation's military and police forces to protect those exporting drugs to the United States. The president using the office as a method to facilitate him doing crimes. Where have you heard that before? The judge who sentenced Hernandez to those 45 years said that he wanted the punishment to serve as a warning to, quote, well-educated, well-dressed individuals who gain power and think their status insulates them from justice when they do wrong. Maybe that description felt a little too familiar to our dear leader, so he had to do what he could to get that dealt with. Though when it comes to Trump, while you may be able to make an argument for well-dressed, I think well-educated might be a bit of a stretch. But I think the real question that everyone is wondering is, outside of obviously not liking to see a former president be accountable for his crimes and sent to prison for them, why did our president pardon a man who was described as being at the center of one of the largest and most violent drug trafficking conspiracies in the world? Though maybe the real question is, what does he get out of it? Because everything this man does while president is for his own personal enrichment. So where did he benefit? The answer to that may be right in front of us. Well, on an island off the coast of Honduras. That's where they're building Prospera, a for-profit city exempt from Honduran law, essentially run by a corporation which itself is funded by Silicon Valley billionaires like Sam Altman and Peter Thiel. So basically a self-governing billionaire city where Bitcoin is legal tender. And in Donald Trump's mind, what's good for the billionaire is good for him. Former President Hernandez was among several right-wing leaders in the country who helped get that billionaire city going, despite serious opposition from others within that country, such as back in 2013 when the Supreme Court of Honduras declared the law that made Prospera possible declared unconstitutional. The response by then President Porfirio Lobo Sosa was to dismiss 4 of those court's judges and have that ruling reversed. So it's all tied together. Hernandez helped the billionaires get their autonomous corporate-run billionaire island. Donald Trump is deeply in league with the billionaires, helping out the guy who helped out the guys that he is in league with and hoping to gain favor with. Makes sense in a very simplistic way. It's just more quid pro quo, something that Donald Trump knows all about. Freeing convicted drug traffickers from prison makes even less sense when you put it next to all the boats the current administration is blowing up off the coast of Venezuela, supposedly also connected to the drug trade. So it seems drugs are bad, the people that bring them into this country are bad, unless you're a foreign president having connections to the tech billionaires. Then you've been treated very unfairly and must be set free. Hypocrisy and contradiction are just commonplace in this current administration, so it almost doesn't shock to see it. Drug traffickers get death by missile unless they're rich, and then they get presidential pardons. It doesn't really make sense, but very little that this administration ever does. And I think one of the most frustrating parts about this whole situation is how there will be absolutely no consequences for Donald Trump. It feels so obviously wrong to have done this, but because he did it as an official presidential act, the Supreme Court says he has complete immunity. So even if it later came out that he literally took money to get Hernandez that pardon, he can't be touched for it. It could be a literal criminal act, and he could suffer no consequence for it. Not to mention that this whole claim that Hernandez's conviction was a Biden conspiracy really falls apart when you look into the fact that it was evidence presented during the conviction of Hernandez's brother back in 2019 by Donald Trump's Department of Justice that resulted in him being sentenced to those 45 years in prison. And the reason it only happened during Biden's time in office is because Hernandez was the president during the time his brother was being sentenced to a life in prison. So trying to tie it to Biden at all really doesn't make sense. But as I stated before, the Trump administration does not care about making sense, so that goes without saying, I suppose. I would say it's pure deflection, just trying to blame the previous guy for this. But I also have to wonder if it's possible that Donald Trump doesn't even know that his own Department of Justice was involved in this, and is simply entirely ignorant of the facts of this case, and is just doing what he knows how to do best, which is to just talk without any sort of knowledge and to act like he knows what's going on when he knows absolutely nothing. It's also a very real possibility that he did know the facts of this case, he was informed of them, and he just completely forgot them because his mind is so degraded by age and poor health that it retains nothing except money good, Biden bad. I could certainly speculate, but I feel like that wouldn't really accomplished anything. When you know there will never be any accountability or consequence for doing what seems like an obviously wrong action, trying to discern a reasoning for having done it feels almost pointless. As a nation, we deserve a leader who doesn't do these things, doesn't pardon convicted drug traffickers, while at the same time using military force to kill other ones. We all deserve a leader with integrity, and time again, Donald Trump has proven that he has none. Pardoning former President Hernandez is certainly not President Trump's first dubious presidential pardon, and unfortunately, absolutely will not be his last. Abusing the sanctity of his office and using it to personally enrich him and his cohorts simply has become the norm under the Donald Trump regime. He's tapped into unchecked power and knows that there's nothing anyone can do to stop him. A future incoming president can unpardon the criminals that he pardoned. The only possible silver lining in this particular situation is that now that he is out of U.S. custody, former President Hernandez may be facing charges in his home country of Honduras. Though given the fact that that country is currently undergoing its own election, and it's looking like the race is down to one right-wing candidate versus another right-wing candidate, the chances of that seem disappointingly slim. Not impossible, but probably unlikely. For a brief moment, it really felt like someone who uses the presidency to masquerade as a leader while using it to enrich himself and do crimes would finally be held accountable for it. But as usual, Donald Trump comes in and says, accountability, consequences, I don't think so. And just like that, he took a wrecking ball to it like it was the East Wing of the White House. I look forward to the day when we don't have a criminal president who's nearly a century old with a brain that certainly is showing its age. But those days are ahead, and we got a lot of days to get through before we get there. So all we can do till then is hold tight. Oh, and definitely vote in the midterms next year. When Democrats are able to take back a little bit of the power, it'll certainly make the next couple years a little bit easier. Alright, guys, that's going to be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news.